Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at Morphy's with this very fine example of a Colt Model 1839 revolving rifle. This is the second pattern of revolving rifle that Colt manufactured. It was made in Paterson, New Jersey by the Colt's Patent Firearms Manufacturing Company. The company was set up in 1836, and it made what we now call Paterson rifles and pistols. Now, the first version of rifle that Colt made, colloquially today known as the ring trigger rifle, he only made about 200 of them. It was not a particularly successful design. I actually have a separate video on the ring trigger gun that I'll link in the description below. Essentially, it was an underpowered rifle. It had 8 or 10 shot cylinders, but the calibers were like 34 up to 44 caliber, 40 caliber. Without a whole lot of powder volume capacity. Colt did manage to sell 50 of those to the US Navy, or to the US military, who used them in the First Seminole War down in Florida, where they performed adequately. Not great, but they weren't a disaster. Colt saw some of the potential shortcomings in the gun. It was fragile. It didn't actually use an exposed hammer to cock the action. It had a separate ring under the gun in front of the trigger guard. He saw the potential to strengthen and improve the design and make it more powerful. And that is what led to this, the model of 1839. This is a much more powerful gun. It is now 6 shots, so the capacity is reduced, but the caliber is 52.5 caliber, 0.525 inch. Much bigger projectile, much greater powder volume. 6 shots, 24-inch barrel. There's now a loading tool mounted onto the side of the action, which the ring trigger guns did not have. This is a definite step up, and it has the exposed hammer that is mechanically simpler and easier to work with than the early ring trigger guns. So let's take a look at this. Let me show you some of the details of it. We'll take it apart, and then we'll talk about what happened to them. Alrighty, so major defining characteristics of this rifle is real easy to spot because it does not have a ring lever down here, and it does have a big ol' exposed spur hammer. So 6 shots. 52.5 caliber, nice big old bore in the cylinder there. And of course you now have a ramrod lever mounted here on the side of the gun. So to load it, you'd do it one chamber at a time. You'd pour powder down in there. You'd seat your projectile on there. And then you have this ramrod built into the side to press the projectile down into place. And it snaps back into position right there when you're not using it. So unlike some of the early revolvers, because this is mounted on the side, and it has a nice, good, sturdy locking mechanism, it's not going to bounce open or fall down when you fire. Anyway, you do that for all 6 rounds. You then can put percussion caps on all 6 of the nipples there, and you're ready to go. We have a 24-inch barrel here with just a little simple nub of a front sight. Right about halfway down, it transitions from round to flat segmented. People would call that hexagonal. It's really not hexagonal. I think there's 16 independent flat sides on there, but that's normal. Your rear sight is just this rear notch that is dovetailed in. So you can adjust this side to side if you need to zero the gun. If you want to adjust the elevation, well, you're going to be filing on it or welding it up. We have manufacturer's marks on the barrel there that says Patent Arms, MF Co., Paterson, New Jersey, Colt's patent, a little bit of decorative squiggle work. There was originally a nice roll stamp around the cylinder depicting, well, there are a couple of different scenes that they depict. Note that it does say Paterson, New Jersey there, spelled with 2 T's, which is correct for this pattern of rifle, but that's not how we actually spell Paterson. Today it's just spelled with 1 T. So Colt's patent. Unfortunately, the roll stamping on this particular cylinder is almost completely worn away. Anyway, firing is done just like any Colt percussion revolver that we're used to today. So that's the half cock notch. You would bring the hammer back to full cock. That rotates the cylinder into position. Pull the trigger. It's going to drop the hammer, fire that round. Classic single action revolver mechanism, which Colt was not exactly the first person to come up with, but he was certainly the guy to make it commercially viable and make it recognizable and commonplace. Disassembly is also just like the later Colt percussion revolvers that we're used to. There is a locking wedge here, and I push that through to there, and then the barrel assembly just slides right off the gun. It's nice and simple. We have our serial number there. This is gun number 519. And I forgot to point this out, but we have here on the stock a little bit light now, but that's because it's, going on 180 years old. A cartouche from WAT, that was William Anderson Thornton, who was the U.S. military inspector who inspected and approved these guns for one of the War Department contracts for Paterson's. All right, back to our disassembly. We have a cylinder here that just slides off this central arbor. Also, serial number 519 right there. You've got your 6 percussion cap nipples. This one has broken off, but you've got the other 5 still intact. These are your cylinder stops. This, like I said, operates a little bit differently than revolvers that we're used to today. Normally, you would, on a modern revolver, you would expect a series of ratchet teeth on the back here, and you have a hand that, when you cock the gun, pushes up and forces the cylinder to rotate. Instead, on this, we have that little cutout notch right there. And back here, we have this rotating peg, or lug. So that lug sits in that notch. And when you cock the hammer, that is pulled radially, counterclockwise, around the cylinder axis. That is what forces the cylinder to rotate. And then we have a cylinder locking pin right there. That is exposed when the hammer is back and when the hammer is all the way forward. When I cock the hammer, that pin retracts back in, which unlocks the cylinder, which then allows it to rotate. So that is how the 1839 pattern revolving carbine works. Pretty cool. This isn't the strongest way to do a revolver. It's not the way that Colt would end up doing on his really successful models, but those improvements would come later. There you go, field stripped Colt 1839 revolving rifle, one of the really important developmental iterations of, modern repeating firepower. With production actually starting in 1838, Colt would make about 950 of these 1839 pattern rifles. Incidentally, he did also make a shotgun version. There were 262 of the shotguns made. They were 5-shot, but with a larger bore, like 20 gauge. I think it was 62 caliber bore on those. Anyway, 950 of the rifles. They're all the same. They're all 52.5 caliber. And of those 950, about 700 of them actually went to military contracts. So the U.S. War Department bought 360 of them, including this one. 300 of those went to the Navy, 60 of them went to the Dragoons, where incidentally they were actually used in the Second Seminole War. So Colt got his revolving rifles in against the Seminoles both times. The Republic of Texas bought 300 of the guns. 180 went to their Navy, and 120 went to their Army and the Texas Rangers. And then the state of Rhode Island actually bought 46 of these as well. So that totals up to just under 700 of the 950 that were made. Part of the problem with these is they were very expensive. They were still a pretty novel system, and they definitely still had some shortcomings with things like potential chain fires. And do you really, where do you hold this out in front? The answer really is you want to have your hand behind the cylinder just to be safe. So Colt still had some work to do, but he wasn't going to get the opportunity to do that work for a while, because in 1842, the Patent Firearms Manufacturing Company officially went bankrupt. The guns were too expensive. They weren't popular enough, the rifles and the pistols together. There was some internal strife in Colt. The treasurer of the company was one of the large creditors of the company. They got bickering back and forth. Ultimately, the treasurer got possession of a bunch of unfinished guns that he would go on to sell himself to recoup the debts that the company owed him for the next couple of years. It was kind of a mess. It wasn't ultimately... Well, Colt wasn't ultimately able to rebuild the company until 1847, when he got a famous contract with Captain Walker of the Texas Rangers to make Walker 1847 pattern, massive, huge revolvers for the Texas Rangers. So that, of course, is a whole separate story, which I do have a video on. I'll link to that one in the description text below as well. But very cool opportunity to get a chance to take a look at this, one of the intermediary designs that Colt was doing. Not his very first, but not the last. Not his very first design, but also one of the guns that he developed during the first iteration of Colt's firearms manufacturing. So big thanks to Morphy's for giving me access to this guy to take apart and film and show to you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.